Sometimes healing doesn't come from moving forward. It comes from returning to the place where love began. The phone call. Rain traced lazy patterns down the window that gray afternoon when the phone rang. Catherine stood watching the droplets race each other down the glass, her mind elsewhere, when her son Daniel's voice cut through the static warmth of the line. "Mom, what would you say to a getaway?" "Just the two of us. I found this little clifftop cottage by the ocean, the kind of place Dad always talked about. Cozy, remote, waves crashing below. What do you think? A few days to unplug and just be..." Catherine's breath caught in her chest. This wasn't the Daniel she knew, the one buried in deadlines and late-night meetings. Trips like this belonged to another lifetime when his father was still alive. "Daniel, that sounds wonderful," she managed, her words tentative. "But are you sure? You don't need to do this for me." "I want to," he said, his tone soft but resolute. "It's been too long since we really connected. I miss our conversations." A flicker ignited in her chest, a warmth she'd almost forgotten existed. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it." When the call ended, she stayed by the window, her gaze drifting to the garden where sunlight suddenly pierced through the clouds, for the first time in weeks. It wasn't just hope stirring inside her. It was something deeper, a quiet thrill, like the pull of an unseen tide calling her back to life. Preparing to return. That evening, Catherine pulled the weathered family journal from the shelf, its pages yellowed and scented with salt air from forgotten travels. Inside were sketches of Daniel as a toddler, photos of her husband James cradling him under wide skies, the three of them with faces alight with joy that felt both vivid and impossibly distant. Her fingers brushed a drawing of them by the ocean. James's arm draped over her shoulder, his eyes holding hers with that steady, unspoken promise. "I hope you're watching somehow, James," she murmured. "He's become such a good man. You'd be so proud of who he's turned into." The days blurred into a gentle rhythm of preparation. Catherine folded clothes into her suitcase with care, slipping in the silver locket James had fastened around her neck on their anniversary, its chain cool against her skin. She hadn't worn it in years, but now it felt essential, like carrying a piece of the horizon with her. The drive, departure morning, dawned crisp and bright. Catherine waited at the door as Daniel's car hummed up the driveway, his grin wide and boyish. For a heartbeat, she saw the child in him, the one who used to clutch her fingers on bustling sidewalks. "All set, Mom?" He hefted her suitcase effortlessly. She nodded, eyes shimmering. "More than you know." The city receded in the rearview mirror, skyscrapers yielding to rolling dunes, then rugged bluffs, until finally the sea unfurled like a vast, breathing canvas. Catherine traced the coastline in the side mirror, her reflection merging with the foam-capped waves. This wasn't just a drive. It whispered of fresh chapters, horizons yet to unfold. Deep in her thoughts, a voice echoed, "Perhaps this journey will reclaim what I believed was lost forever." The road twisted along sheer drops, each bend unveiling broader expanses of turquoise and foam. Catherine watched gulls wheel against the sky, their cries mingling with the engine's hum. Daniel fiddled with the radio. An old melody drifted out, pulling her mind back, not to the present rush, but to the sun-drenched beginnings of her life with James. Memories surface. They'd met at 24 in a quaint coastal bookstore, heavy with the scent of brine and aged paper. He'd wandered in seeking maps of hidden coves, his grin tentative, his voice laced with easy charm. "Books aren't really my thing," he'd confessed, rubbing his temple. "But if I'm going to chase waves out there, I ought to know the currents." Her laughter had bubbled up, surprising them both. Light, unguarded. She'd guided him to the shelf, but he'd lingered, weaving questions about her favorite stories, the sea's moods, dreams unspoken. He returned the next morning with steaming tea and stories that stretched until the shop's lights dimmed. Their bond bloomed slow and sure, like mist burning off at sunrise. They shared whispers over shelved novels, explored untrodden beaches, shaped tomorrows together. Their first escape had been to a weathered cottage perched above a sheltered bay ringed by wild grasses. James had overloaded the trunk with snacks they'd never finish. Days blurred into shell hunts and starlit confessions by driftwood fires. His gaze on her wasn't fierce. It was knowing, as if he cherished the shadows she hid as much as the light. When Daniel arrived, that gaze lingered in every glance James cast their way. "He's got your spirit, Catherine," he'd say, cradling their boy. And she'd beam, seeing their shared dreams reflected in those wide eyes. Now, as the car hugged the cliffside, James's laughter seemed to ride the wind, soft and persistent, like a buoy bobbing on familiar swells. Daniel shot her a sideways look. "Penny for your thoughts? You're miles away." She smiled faintly. "Just sailing through old waters. Your dad? He lived for the sea, said it humbled him. I remember, he replied, voice gentle. He'd tell stories about it, about how it kept secrets and taught you to breathe deeper. Catherine nodded. He believed calm wasn't something you chased. It washed over you when you least expected it. A comfortable silence settled between them, rich with unspoken bonds. Catherine realized then that James hadn't slipped entirely from her grasp. He echoed in Daniel's easy laugh, his thoughtful pauses, the quiet strength he wore like a well-fitted coat. The cottage emerged from the coastal haze, clapboard walls bleached by salt, a stone hearth, the bay's gleam far below. Inside, Catherine's palm skimmed the scarred oak table, its grain a tether to now even as it tugged her toward then. She could almost glimpse her younger self teasing James as he fumbled with driftwood kindling, their laughter tangling with the ocean's roar. But time's currents had shifted. Laughter-filled seasons of shared suppers and sandy footprints had crested into a stormy autumn. James's illness had crept in on a gray dawn, unannounced. The blur that followed, clinics and fragile hopes, grips tightening then releasing, Catherine pushed from her mind. She'd vowed resilience for Daniel's sake. She'd held it together, but a silence had cloaked her soul, a chamber too vast to escape. Here, amid the tang of kelp and gale, that chamber's door creaked ajar. As twilight fell, Daniel coaxed a blaze to life while Catherine unpacked. Flames danced shadows across the walls, bathing everything in amber. She perched by the window, dusk draping the bay in indigo. Daniel pressed a mug into her hands, hot cider laced with clove, just as James used to brew it. I didn't forget, he said, smirking. Catherine's throat tightened. You didn't, she breathed. Beyond the window, the surf murmured like a half-remembered lullaby, tender, timeless. Eyes closed, she leaned into the moment. No longer sorrow's sting, but rediscovery. A melody etched deep, words rising unbidden. For the first time in years, her recollections weren't solitary. The yesterdays hadn't ebbed. They'd waited, serene and steadfast, for her return. And in her core, she sensed this voyage through salt and stone was guiding her toward an unnamed grace already blooming like dawn over the tide. Morning at the bay. Morning light seeped through gauzy drapes, etching golden veins on the floorboards. Catherine roused to the trill of gulls and a sizzle from the kitchen. The stillness wrapped her like a shawl, not burdensome but serene. Padding in, she found Daniel at the stove, whistling a tune James had favored on lazy Sundays. It tugged at her, a ripple from another shore. Early riser today, she teased. He flipped a pancake with flair. Figured I'd treat you to the cliffside special. Her chuckle was soft. Bold move. Remember your last kitchen adventure. The smoke alarm still echoes. He laughed. Lesson learned. I've leveled up. She sipped her tea, eyes on his steady hands, methodical, attentive. A mirror of James, not in form but in essence. They savored the meal in wordless ease, the sort that bloomed from trust. Outside, grasses nodded in the breeze, catching sparks of sun. After breakfast, Daniel proposed a stroll to the bay. The trail meandered through dunes fringed with sea oats, the air sharp with ozone and wildflowers. Catherine ambled slowly, absorbing it all. The breakers hush, sand sighing underfoot, light prisming through fronds. It echoed paths from years past with James, though time had smoothed the sharp edges. An unexpected reunion. Nearing the water, she spotted a figure by the tide pools. Fishing rod in hand, stance loose, yet patient. A silhouette she'd known in dreams. He piv. Oded. And her step faltered. Catherine? Catherine Monroe. His face lit with astonishment, then warmth. Daniel peered curiously. Old friend? She nodded, voice hushed. From years ago. The archive. This is Robert Ellis. The name surfaced with a cascade of memories, banter over archival files, reaching for the same ledger, murmurs that bridged the voids James's fading had left. In those shadowed months they'd leaned close, not in passion, but in shared solace. He'd mourned a brother lost to the waves. Sorrow became their quiet language. Yet tides had pulled them apart. He'd moved to a distant shore for work. She'd anchored herself in routine's harbor, a decade's silence. And now, here, by this bay of buried joys. Never dreamed I'd find you here, she said, still dazed. Nor I you, he echoed, grin soft. My sister's place is nearby. I slip away for lines in the surf when the world gets too loud. A getaway with my son, she said, nodding to Daniel. His idea start to finish. His gaze softened. Smart young man. This coast still weaves its spells. Daniel drifted off along the strand, sketchpad in tow, granting them the shore's edge. The space between Catherine and Robert hummed with echoes and renewal. like reclaiming a lighthouse long dark, its beam instinctive. They spoke of paths diverged, joys unearthed, time's subtle etchings. Robert shared his days mentoring at a maritime center, devouring books she'd once pressed into his hands. She laughed as he admitted hoarding her worn copy of The Ocean at Night. "All this time, and it's still yours?" she asked. He nodded, eyes alight. "Some treasures you guard close." The phrase lingered, light as sea glass. Not a weight, but a nod to truth's enduring. Warmth bloomed in Catherine's chest. Not the blaze of bygone flames, but the steady lantern of connection. Once a balm, still meaningful. As the sun dipped, Gildan. "Gee, the waves." Daniel's call floated from afar. She turned, heart laced with bittersweet calm. Robert shouldered his gear. "Seeing you again? It's a gift, Catherine." She smiled, lingering. "Likewise. Stay well." He inclined his head. "I will. And Catherine." A beat, words weighed. "You seem lighter than when last we met. It's good to see." Emotion welled, unnamed. "Thank you," she murmured. The final day, dawn broke cool and hushed, sharpening every rustle. Catherine rose before Daniel. The cottage steeped in quiet so profound the waves seemed to whisper secrets. Their final day by the sea. Readiness tugged one way, reluctance the other. But a deeper current urged one last revelation. Daniel joined her at the window, sleep-rumpled. "Up with the tide again?" She smiled faintly. "The bay's calling differently today." He peered into the haze. "It is, isn't it?" Breakfast passed in their familiar rhythm, unpressured, but Catherine caught his glances. Words brewing. At last he exhaled. "Mom, before we head back, there's a spot I need to share with you." Intrigued, she followed as he led through whispering grasses up a rise where light spilled like liquid honey. They crested a ledge to find a humble driftwood bench, time-worn, facing the endless blue. Catherine halted. "This is breathtaking," Daniel nodded. "Dad brought me here when I was little." Surprise widened her eyes. "He did?" "Yeah," Daniel said steadily. "Mornings after you left for work, we'd wander up here and just breathe, his spot for sorting the world's noise, remembering the heart of things." Her chest tightened. "He kept it from me. Wanted it sacred, I guess. But before the end, he made me swear, when the moment felt true, bring you here and give you this." From his satchel, a slim audio player emerged, edges softened by years. Inside, a tiny recording labeled in James's handwriting. Her fingers shook as Daniel pressed play. James's voice crackled to life, warm as sun-warmed sand. "My beloved Catherine, if this reaches you, know I ran out of sunsets to say it all. You've been my anchor, my wildest adventure. Don't chain yourself to what's receded. Sail on. Find your peace. Let joy crest again. Bring Daniel to these cliffs. They'll show you, after the fiercest storm, dawn always breaks. And Remy, ember this. Love doesn't sink. It reshapes. It rides new waves. Ever yours, James." She clutched the player, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. Grief had been her vigil, guarded lest release meant erasure. But James's voice pierced like light through spray, merciful, radiant. Daniel's hand found her shoulder. "I held off until now, so it could land here, as he wished." Voice quivering, she met his eyes. "This whole trip, all for him?" He grinned faintly. "Found the recording in Dad's sea chest months ago. Felt like time to return, not to mourn but to honor." Together, gazing at her son, Catherine's soul swelled boundless. "You've become the man he'd celebrate." Daniel's smile mirrored his father's. Learned from the best teachers. The turning tide. They lingered on the bench, the bay sprawling below, gulls keening overhead. The sun climbed, burnishing the mist to gold. She replayed the words, "Gratitude eclipsing sorrow." "I understand now," she said softly. "Love doesn't vanish with the tide, it carves new channels." Daniel nodded. "Maybe that's why we came, to reclaim it." Silence held them, the world turning, swells rising, light dancing, existence ebbing and flowing within. Catherine felt the shift mirror it all. Rising at last, she scanned the vista. "Farewell, James," she breathed. Not goodbye, but gratitude. Peace. Homeward, the skies unclouded. Catherine traced the gleaming coast with a smile, alive with promise. Daniel caught her eye, sensing the tide's turn in her. Homecoming. That evening, settled in her armchair by the hearth, Catherine tucked the recording beside a cherished sketch of their trio. The locket gleamed at her throat, catching the firelight. Memories flowed, James's laugh, his palm's reassuring weight, Daniel's tiny hand in hers. Each pulsed vital, not scars but testaments to an undying current. Eyes drifting shut, she confided to the Kwai. "T, this is his gift. Love transforms, but never departs. Beyond the window, the night breeze sighed through branches, bearing eternity's hush, not vanished, merely transfigured. In that amber stillness, Catherine grasped healing's true face. Not erasure, but evolution into light. Because sometimes the greatest gift isn't holding on, it's learning how to let love flow in new directions while honoring where it began. Sometimes healing means returning to the place where your heart first learned to feel, so it can remember how to beat again.